What might be some of the most salient factors, the X, Y's, and Z's, that have propelled you into leadership roles?
I spent all my life in major research universities. And so to go to Morehouse, no matter, even if it was my alma mater, was a big change. But it really pointed out to me the importance of Morehouse College and places like it in the national, just in the national enterprise. This is, speaking of stories, you'll like this story. I was really struggling with this decision, and I came home one night from Chicago. I'd been here for a meeting, and I got off the plane in Oakland. We lived in Oakland. And there was Shirley and my two sons.
Shirley, your wife.
Shirley, my wife, right, and my two sons, Eric and Keith. Keith lived in Colorado, and Eric lived, he was here in Chicago. That's right, he was here in Chicago. And I said, what are you guys doing here? And Shirley said, we should talk about this as a family, whether you should go to Morehouse. And we did, and I remember Eric, my youngest son, said, Dad, it'd be great if you could be president of the University of California. And I was up for that. I was the second person in the system. He said, but you can make a much bigger difference being president of Morehouse.
It occurs to me that you're still standing there at Morehouse College looking at your name on the list of those who passed the exams, and you're always surprised about how you've arrived.
Well, you hit on it. You said, they're not decisions that I made solely out of my personal sense of commitment and self-sacrifice. I don't want to leave that opinion. I'm as selfish as, I'm very ambitious. Morehouse taught us that. And I'm highly motivated, hardworking, and you always want to be at the top, you know, for many reasons. So, but that X, Y, and Z often turns out to be friends and family and other colleagues who help you see things, you know, in a larger perspective. Speaking of the colleagues in that decision, a long-time friend and advisor to me has been Vernon Jordan. And I've known Vernon for a number of years through various associations.
Vernon Jordan being a major civil rights leader.
Vernon Jordan, former president of the National Urban League, advisor to presidents, and particularly President Clinton, and one of the icons in, I think, business and civil rights in the African-American history. People who know Vernon know sometimes he speaks in this sonorous voice when he wants to convey things. So when I was struggling with this, I called Vernon from California, and I said, Vernon, you know, he knew me. We had talked a lot, and he knew they were calling me from Morehouse because Vernon had called me before and said, Dr. Massey, they want you at Morehouse now. I said, Vernon, I'm not going back to Morehouse. Look, I'm out here. I'm in my world, research, national labs, science, public policy. And I called Sir Vernon, what do you think? He said, Dr. Massey, and you will know the verse. It's Isaiah, and I should know it. And he said, read this. I said, what does it say? He said, I heard a voice say, who shall I send, and who will go for me? Isaiah, and I said, here am I. Oh, Lord, send me. Vernon said, he said, you need to go to Morehouse, Walter. So the X, Y, and Z is, I think, if you're lucky, and I have been, you have family and friends who can help affirm what your decision and help kind of guide you to make a decision that you might know you want to make, but you're not quite there, right?
We call those communities of discourse and practice.
Well, that's interesting, yeah.